Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan, and you're watching another poetry video. You probably thought to yourself, what do I want to watch on YouTube today? Do I want to watch something frivolous and cheap like popcorn, or do I want to do a deep dive with Ryan Freeman? And I'm glad you chose the latter. Just kidding. Actually, I am glad. Anyways, today comes a short poem from the giant book of poetry. This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. This was a poet who lived in the 20th century from England. He had a sort of a tragic life, died in his 60s, didn't have any children, had a lot of repressions from my research. And so I think you're going to hear his dissatisfaction with life in these three short stanzas that rhyme. I'm not going to tell you what the poem is like. I want you to hear it. All right? I want you to hear it. Then I want you to make your own opinion. Then you're going to hear my opinion. And then you're going to, please, if you're so kind, down in the comments, tell me your thoughts, whether you agree, disagree with me, or how you feel about This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. Here we go. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy-stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man, it deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can, and don't have any kids yourself. All right, what did you guys think of that? Was that a very life-inspiring poem, or was that a poem filled with misery? You can be the judge of that. So let's go over it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But just in case there's any confusion, we'll just go over what it means, and then I'm going to tell you my thoughts and opinions. So, they fuck you up, your mum and dad. So, obviously British. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. So, who fucks you up? Your mum and dad. But why do they do it? Do they have a reason? No, they don't mean to do it, but they do it anyways. And how do they fuck you up? Well, they fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. So maybe your mom and dad brought you into the world and they wanted to do a good job. They didn't mean to fuck you up, but they did it. And they give you the faults that they had. Maybe that's genetic faults. Maybe they gave you a predisposition for cancer. Or maybe they gave you their prejudiced attitudes that they inherited. And they add some extra just for you. So perhaps just the cocktail of mom and dad together, mixed together, you get a little extra. More than just the two of them. If you added them up, it's actually a little more synergy, if that makes sense. They give you more faults than perhaps even they had, is what he might be saying. Second stanza, but they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy-stern and half at one another's throats. So here's the explanation, because that's the first stanza is kind of dour. Mom and dad fucked me up. They didn't want it, but they fucked me up by giving me not only their faults, but more than just their faults. Why did they do it? How did this happen? What's the explanation for the tragedy? Well, here's the explanation. But they were fucked up in their turn. So they were fucked up, so they fucked you up. And who fucked them up? By fools in old-style hats and coats. So by the older generation, their parents, who half the time were soppy-stern and half at one another's throats. So just a little criticism and cheap shot at the older generation who were soppy-stern. You know, you go further back, people are a little more proper, a little more stern. A man's a man. But sometimes they're soppy, and sometimes, you know, sort of that dichotomy between very serious, that serious old man, and the old man who breaks down crying. And then half the time, they're at one another's throats. So they might have been physically violent. And, I don't know, domestic abuse. I'm not sure on the statistics, but whenever I talk to my older friends, like I've got a neighbor, and he told me his dad kicked the shit out of him. I'm not trying to make light of it, but I think that corporal punishment was a lot more accepted back in the day. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. So, what does each generation impart to the next generation? What do we give our kids? Well, according to our poet Philip Larkin, misery. That's bleak. But we do hand down misery. But anyways, I'm going to save my opinion until I finish this part. It deepens like a coastal shelf. So, if you go to the coast, it's kind of shallow in the waters, and then it gets deeper, deeper, deeper. So he's saying the misery amongst our human species gets deeper and deeper. So but he gives us a solution. So he gives us the problem. All right. Your parents fucked you up. And they not only gave you all their faults, but they gave you more faults than they originally had. And they did it because their parents fucked them up, and their parents were even worse. They were wearing old-style hats and coats, and were soppy-stern, and were choking each other. This is a really bleak situation, guys. We just keep passing on misery to each generation. But here's a solution. So he gives us a very dour picture, but then he gives us an idea. Get out as early as you can. So check out of life. And by the way, don't have any kids yourself. So this problem doesn't perpetuate. So that is This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. Very pessimistic, very dark poem, but a fun poem to read, right? So if you just read it, they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy-stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. I like that it rhymes. I like that it's simple. And now my opinion. So, I don't know. I have felt this way at times in my life. I don't feel that way now. I don't feel that way usually, but every once in a while, when we are going through deep despair, we're looking at the fragments of our dreams. Our dreams have shattered. Things have not turned out the way we wanted them to. Perhaps we wanted our family to stay together and be loving, but it split apart. Perhaps we wanted that dream career and it didn't come true. We have a tragedy in life, and sometimes we look at the fragments of our life and we are filled with despair and sadness and resentment because this wasn't how my life was supposed to be. Sorry, I'm a little hot. This was not how my life was supposed to be. Who's to blame? And of course, we point our fingers at our parents, and psychologists in the past largely have agreed with pointing our fingers at the parents, but Philip Larkin very accurately points out to the fact that, well, they could just point their finger to their parents. And then if you follow that argument, and then they point to their parents and their parents and their parents, and then pretty soon we get back to the Garden of Eden. It was Adam and Eve's fault. And then they point to the serpent who tricked them into sin. And then he points to God who created him, right? So it all goes back to God eventually. Darn it, God. All right. So if you keep pointing the finger at the person behind you or in front of you, which depending on which way you're looking, you never get down to the root cause of it. Eventually, you just say, okay, my life didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. My career didn't go the way I wanted it to, or my family hasn't developed the way I wanted it to. And you can be very resentful, and you can be very dark, and you can hate life. You can hate life so much that you don't want to go on living, which he suggests, get out as early as you can. It's not a fun ride. It's not always a fun ride. It's not always, but I would argue that it's a pretty damn good ride, even with a lot of the misery in the world. And there is misery. We're not going to sugarcoat it, okay? Life can be very tough, can be full of suffering, but it's not only suffering. In fact, I would say that on the whole, life has more joy than bad, but everyone's life is different. I'm not trying to say that my opinion is the only opinion or that what I'm saying is true for you or other people you know. But on the whole, I don't agree that you should just get out as early as you can. No, maybe you should wait until your depressive mood passes and you look at the brighter side of life, like the dark storm clouds that have the silver lining. And for me, I mean, I haven't had the worst life, but I've gone through parents who have divorced. I've gone through, an education where my parents or my teachers didn't understand me. I've gone through sort of a religious schism and had to pick up the pieces of my faith. I've had to change jobs, change countries, relationship issues, losing friends. I've gone through the normal. I've been in jail. I've gone through a lot of the normal parts of misery. But I've always found that even though at the times where I was sunk into my despair, sunk into my misery, and I did feel exactly like Philip Larkin, that I wanted to point the blame at God or life or mankind or America or my parents, I've always found that once I said, you know what? Well, I guess this is the way it is. Then I started to enjoy life. Like when I was in jail, the first couple weeks in jail were miserable because I just was trying to put the finger on what got me here. And then finally when I was like, well, I'm here. Let's talk to the guys. And then I met some great friends and enjoyed bath time a lot. Well, not that much. Started reading books and, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't cry at life for giving you lemons. Just do something with those goddamn lemons, all right? And don't have any kids yourself. So I recently found out that there's a movement called the anti-natalist movement. And I was like, what the hell is that? One of my subscribers had that in his screen name. New subscribers, something anti-natalist. And I was like, what's an anti-natalist? So I started researching it, and it's people who hate life so much that they don't believe in having children, and they discourage other people from having children. And kind of like our poet, Philip Larkin, in This Be the Verse, is saying, life's so miserable. It sucks to come into this world as this beautiful child and take on all the miseries that gets deeper like a coastal shelf. Not only should you check out a life, but don't have any more kids. So the anti-natalists don't want you to have kids. They don't want to have kids. And I think there's a lot of people who may not consciously come to this conclusion, but a lot of people who forego having kids because maybe unconsciously or consciously, they just see it as something maybe they're unhappy. And so they don't want to bring them into the world. I think everyone can make their own decision. And have your own opinion, but from my perspective, I think one of the greatest joys is to make love to someone you love, and the greatest result of that is a baby. That's my opinion in terms of the feeling that you get, because love, like real love, it redeems all the miseries of life. Like if I have to go a bunch of miserable hours of the day, but I can just spend several beautiful hours with the people I love, it's sometimes worth it. Of course, I don't want to be in misery. I want to be happy, and just like everyone else wants to be. That's very natural. So I'm not trying to say that anything with this poem is wrong. I think it's a very interesting poem. It provoked my thoughts enough that I wanted to share it with you. I would love to hear your opinion. I just think that, and I felt this way. I've felt this way, and I probably will feel this way again. But once it passes, and once I see the silver lining on the cloud, and once I come to accept the fact that, okay, I've got these oranges when I wanted cherries. Well, I'll make orange juice. When I finally come to accept my position, it's like the guy, there are people who don't have legs, and maybe they become miserable and they hate life because they don't have legs. Or maybe they go on to be the fastest person to run on 2 arms. Look it up. There's people who do these competitions. Or they take jiu-jitsu and wrestling even though they have no legs. And they're happy. They're filled with life. So I think it's not to ignore the tragic, not to ignore the misery, but to find that spirit of life, that zest for living that overcomes it, and you embrace who you are, you embrace your history, you embrace your family, for good or ill. We all kind of have a crapshoot of who our family is, and we might not always be happy with them all the time. We might need to put some distance between ourselves once in a while, or a lot of while. And everyone's family is different. I'm not trying to diminish anyone's suffering. But once we come to accept who we are, accept our place, then we can actually start enjoying life. And then when you start enjoying life, the ball starts rolling, you start being happier, you have more energy, and then I think your life can generally improve. I think resentment towards life, your life, and life in general is one of the most dangerous things. I think that's probably what leads a lot of people to terrorism, or just a lot of people looking very unhappy. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but anyways, I thought this was an interesting poem to share with you, and I would love to hear your thoughts. So put it down in the comments after you click like and subscribe. My name's Ryan. I will see you next time.